in 1979, wrote an article for Second Look magazine. The title, I believe, was How the CIA Views the UFO Phenomenon. He said, among other things, this subject was so sensitive that you did not talk about it in the agency unless you had a need to. Nevertheless, there were rumors floating around at the highest levels of CIA about recovered crashed UFOs and the bodies of their crews. Thirdly, Victor Marchetti said, in his opinion, as an intelligence analyst with CIA for I think 11 years, he was of the opinion that no government on earth will voluntarily release this information because it would jeopardize the status quo, i.e. their power. Even if there's no hostile intent or implication to the visitation of these beings, if indeed these are extraterrestrials, even if they're not meaning us any harm whatsoever, governments have nothing to gain and everything to lose by admitting the reality of this. And Victor Marchetti's opinion is that this will probably come out, by some action on the part of the phenomenon itself, which will leave no doubt in anyone's mind, but don't expect Washington or Moscow or any other government to volunteer the reality of all of this.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Canan. I'm a defense writer of long standing in this town for Gannett Newspapers, Business Week magazine, and I was senior editor of Air Force magazine. I'm going to ask a question, but I want to contribute something. When I was on Air Force magazine, I was told by an Air Force colonel of long acquaintance that this was real and that we were actually dealing with the aliens. I never had the guts to write. He said, you won't have the guts to write this. I said, no, because I have to confirm it. And if you can't tell me how to confirm it, he did give me a couple names, but it didn't pan out. I was like all the rest of the press, if I couldn't confirm it, I wouldn't write it. Now, that may mean that we're somewhat cowardly, but at the same time, it means that we're also very careful. I do sympathize with the members of the press who do not write about this, even though I myself am convinced of it by now, because I was one of them once. But now, I have a question contemporary. 2 years ago, the Air Force Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Air Force were dismissed by the Secretary of Defense for, among other reasons, being sloppy in their management of nuclear weapons. We transported an armed one somewhere, we sent components overseas and so forth. This shook up the Air Force. I want to ask you gentlemen, in the aggregate or individually, do you think that this evidence of malfeasance ranks up there with not telling the public about alien or UFO intrusion at nuclear sites? Is there an equation there?
Can I speak to that, Mr. I don't know about ranking, but it points out the dangers of nuclear weapons. The fact that these accidents have occurred, serious accidents with nuclear weapons, and it just points out how dangerous it is that we have them. I don't know how to compare that with the cover-up. I'd have done an analysis of the cover-up, and I'd be glad to give it to any of you guys that are interested. But I think it's related in the fact that the cover-up of the fact that the UFOs did intercede with our nuclear weapons is extremely important.
May I add something? This Air Force colonel who talked to me about all this, he did so in result to my questioning about it after a Japan Airlines freighter over Alaska was trailed by a UFO in 1987. I called all over Elmendorf, FAA, the Pentagon. And then I was approached by this colonel whom I had known, who said, I understand you are interested in UFOs. And I said, yeah, well, I have something to tell you. And since he had known me a long time, that's why he got into this. It had no great enterprise on my part, and I still don't know what to believe. But would you comment on, he also said, though, that we have a lot of misconceptions about what they are here for. He said they basically don't give a damn. They don't care what we do. They're here for their own purposes. And that any notion that they should land and say, take us to your leader, boggles the imagination because they don't care about that kind of thing. And I said, well, do you have any idea why they are here? He said no. And he didn't think anybody else in the Air Force or anywhere else did either. How does that square?
Let me interject regarding the November 87 radar tracking incident that you alluded to.
Right, and
in recent years, you may know that the number 5 guy in the echelon at FAA, John Callahan,
right.
Has gone public and said that shortly after that happened, CIA agent, 2 agents, I believe, and some other government types convened a meeting at FAA headquarters and said we want all the radar tapes, all the voice tapes, and this never happened. I wasn't here. John Callahan said, how come we can't tell the people about this? According to this FAA administrator, the CIA agent said the people would panic, the public would panic. John Callahan, to his immense credit, kept some of the data down in his office. The CIA agent said, give me all of this. He gave him everything that was on the table, didn't tell him about what was downstairs. And when he left the agency, John Callahan released that to the public. So CIA is still quite involved in all of this.
Leslie Kane's great book includes that again.
I think regarding well, to follow up on the other part of your question about, what are they up to, why are they here, and so on, no one knows. Maybe the people at the CIA and the Pentagon and the Kremlin don't even know. However, these very simplistic scenarios of if they're real and they're here, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Well, if they're anthropologists and this is a classroom experiment, you don't interject yourself into the experiment, you observe. Or an alternate scenario, if this backwards planet is on the verge of a nuclear holocaust, maybe on a limited basis you intervene in a way that the Pentagon knows what's going on, the Kremlin knows what's going on, except for troublemakers like us, the public at large in neither country does not know what's going on. So in effect, you send a signal, in my opinion, to governments about nuclear weapons without alarming the general populace. The late Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was a UFO skeptic, he worked for Project Blue Book for so many years, he eventually believed, I've been wrong, science has been wrong, these are real, and we should check into it. When asked why, the aliens, if that's who they are, do not visit us, he said, a zoo is a nice place to visit, but you don't communicate with the lizards. So, there's any number of plausible scenarios to explain why we have not had open contact. I am of the opinion that whoever they are have enough sense to know that if they interject themselves into our reality in one fell swoop, there could be very dire repercussions. Whereas, on the other hand, if they engage in an on-again, off-again cat-and-mouse behavior that allows a slow psychological conditioning of humankind to the reality and the presence of themselves, then when open contact, if that indeed is in the cards, occurs, there will be far less trauma.
Thank you. I wasn't meaning to contest your point of view, by the way, merely pointing out what I had heard.
It's all right.
Michael Rank from Lancaster County. Al and I came down this afternoon, and we were talking about the fact that we are now able to combine human and non-human genetic materials by our medical sciences. And I don't know whether any of you have had a chance to read Professor Jacobs' book, The Threat. He's a tenured professor at Temple University, and he has been doing regression therapy with abductees for years, and he has quite a body of knowledge there. One of my reasons for asking this is, being an old district attorney, the definition of murder is the unlawful killing of another human being, but nowhere does it say, does it have to be 100% human? Can it be 1% human? I'm waiting for somebody to play that card. I'm out of the business now, but that might be fun. The other issue is the toadies in government who are following their orders to lose the files in Freedom of Information Acts, I think might take a totally different view as to their attempt to preserve their jobs if they realize that there might be an argument made that there's a First Amendment violation by suppressing the truth about these things that have been found and seen and so forth. The suppression works to favor certain religions versus other religions. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you for coming. Again, all of us will be available for one-on-one interviews for some period of time. Thank you.